Hello there, my name is Mackenzie. Welcome back to my channel, and thank you so much for being here. Today we are doing adaptation versus book, Witcher Season 2 TV show versus the first two books in which it covers. First two books being The Blood of Elves and The Time of Contempt, and this one was very funny because they would literally say, "It is the time of contempt," like every 10 pages, and it was near hysterical. So these books represent the first and second books in the actual series. The first two books being books of short stories. These ones are actually a continuous story all the way through, front to back, start to finish, with an ending, a plot, and everything. We continue following Geralt, who is a character who just doesn't care about the political machinations of the world, power moves, mages, or anything. He cares about Ciri, he cares about Yennefer, and that's about it. In the show, we can just hop right in here because, quite frankly, you guys, the show is so different. By this point, things have changed so drastically that it's not even really the same story anymore. Let's start with Sadden Hill. Just real quick, let's start. Because we saw the Battle of Sadden Hill in Season 1. However, a lot of things about Sadden Hill are kind of retcons, not necessarily from show season to season, but more so from book to show. Yennefer is not the person who is the hero of Sadden Hill. Vigilforts is actually the person who saves everybody at Sadden Hill, and that's why he receives the credit for saving everyone at Sadden Hill. It is believed that Triss Merigold is actually the person who died at Sadden Hill. There's supposed to be 12 deaths and she is the 13th, or 11 deaths and she's the 12th, and in the show they just add an extra one and it was supposed to be Yennefer, and Triss really just doesn't, like, they try to give you an emotional sense of Triss and they tried to make you feel bad for her, but because it is really only mentioned that Yennefer is the one who died and she comes back to life, Triss is the one who very nearly got she had all of those torments. We saw a scene of her needing healing, and they just gave all of that to Yennefer. We get a lot of that this season, where Yennefer is really getting the big bulk of storylines from all of these other characters, just to make her seem more important, because quite frankly, in the first two books, when she's not with Geralt, she's not doing anything. They're not doing anything. And it's only in book 2 when Yennefer comes into play. These books are very, very slow. They're slow-paced, character-driven, not a lot happens, and that's why the season 2 ended up doing 2 full books, because not too much ended up happening between these 2 books. They changed a lot about the way that the characters interact with each other and what they mean to each other in the show, and it just doesn't make too much sense. So, we talked about Sadden Hill, about how Yennefer is getting a lot of plot lines. We'll touch on it a little bit more. We also open up the show, with Geralt and Yennefer traveling to Kaer Morhen, which is the home of the Witchers, where they take their children to be mutated to become Witchers, and where they train. Their home, a rest stop, really. A safe place for all Witchers, because only Witchers know how to get there. The time the book takes to get us to Kaer Morhen is almost a quarter of the whole thing, and they did it in one episode. 1 or 2 episodes. They did use one episode with that one guy and his vampire girlfriend, and that was definitely all book to show, very definitive. But everything else really just seemed to be on fast forward. So once they get to Kaer Morhen, there are much more Witchers there than there ever are in the books. They're all kind of the same personality, so I'm not sure why there are so many there, other than the fact that they wanted to have this scene where monsters invade Kaer Morhen, which doesn't happen in the books, nor do those prostitutes come to Kaer Morhen. None of that happens, and it's really just like the showrunners were like, we need more action, and so they forced it in there without any regard for how it would make sense plot-wise, even though they're trying to make the show more plot-driven. I have no idea. Didn't the showrunner also do an interview where she was like, there's so many plot points to pull from, we never really have to change the plot or go off on our own, but that's what they did in season 2. I'm butthurt. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy much of this. In the books, after we get to Kaer Morhen, they start to gently train Ciri. The idea is to get her to be strong, to train like a witcher. It was never a question of whether they were going to be training Ciri to be a witcher. It was, Ciri is in danger. Ciri needs to learn how to use a sword. We're teaching her how to do that. During her training, she starts to have visions and prophesize, and she can't remember things, and she blacks out for days. And so they call upon Triss. Triss Merigold enters the scene. She goes to Kaer Morhen fully expecting for Geralt to be with her, and it is like her one character point, the only thing she cares about, really. Once she realizes she's there for Ciri, she's not truly happy. She is a little bit frightened of Ciri's power, but she doesn't, not in the same way that she is in the show. She's almost horrified at the amount of power that Ciri has. And in the book, it's not like that at all. In the book, we do dub Ciri as a source of magical power. There's nothing in the book about Ciri's blood being the reason or the way that they can make more witchers. It is discussed in the book that Vesemir and Triss are talking about how the old witchers in the olden days, when they were making the serums and the potions to make more witchers, they needed a sorcerer to help them. But all the sorcerers died out without teaching any new sorcerers how to make it, and none of the witchers know it because it's a magic. So nobody knows how to make more witchers. It has nothing to do with Ciri's elder blood, like, at all. It's weird. There's a lot of training montages in the show, and a lot of that, and why? It's very boring. I mean, like, it's very interesting the way they decided to do the show, because it's definitely more like they want it to be plot-driven, but they're not putting a lot of plot in there. It's just kind of like, why did we need so many? There's also a scene where Geralt uses Ciri as bait, and that would never happen in the book. And not that it just doesn't happen in the book, that's not a scene in the book. Also, it would never happen. I'm almost offended. They have a father-daughter relationship, and it's like the show is so focused on it being a plot-driven show that they're disregarding the character relationships that people have with each other. At least they did get Triss right, because in the show, all she wants is for Geralt to sleep with her, and that's how she is in the book too, I'm not gonna lie. So there is no Leshy invasion at Kaer Morhen. There is only 1 or 2 witchers ever present at a time aside from Vesemir. He is there all the time. Triss comes. After Triss dubs Ciri a source, she's like, you need someone else. You probably need Yennefer. It's never a question that Yennefer died at Sadden Hill because she wasn't the, big source of magic. She also doesn't lose her powers at all. Only to give Yennefer something to do in the show. At least that part makes sense, but why take away her power? Because then they create this whole storyline where in order to get her power, she needs to do something for the witch, and what the witch wants her to do is to hurt Ciri. Which is not the case in the books. In the books, after Triss leaves, Geralt leaves with Ciri to go to Nenneca. And he leaves Ciri with Nenneca. Geralt goes off to go fight the firefucker. That is in the book, and that is something that happens. However, Yennefer picks Ciri up after, at Nenneca, and they train together. And Ciri and Yennefer kind of grow to like each other. Their relationship is rocky at first because Yennefer thinks Ciri is kind of there to replace her, and that is kind of an icky thing, because Ciri's a child. I know that Geralt and Yennefer are like almost immortal beings and live forever, but it's very icky to imagine Geralt and Ciri together, and Ciri taking Yennefer's place as like a romantic partner for Geralt. It's so gross. But after Yennefer realizes that Ciri is much more of a daughter to Geralt, and that's how Ciri views Geralt, she kind of warms up to her a little bit more. And they develop this relationship, this rapport. It's cute and tender, tumultuous, nervous, gentle. It's the beginnings of a mother-daughter relationship, if that relationship started when the daughter is like 13. And it's very sweet to see it develop. And then the show decided to ruin it and make the first meeting that Yennefer sees Ciri is like, oh crap, because I have to kidnap that girl and sacrifice her for my magic. Well, you're going to take away the sweetness of that mother-daughter relationship, that budding relationship, and use it for your plot? Not a fan. Yennefer also doesn't get kidnapped. She's also the one that saves Jaskier from being kidnapped. Jaskier gets kidnapped by the firefucker, and Yennefer comes and saves him from the fire guy. Then Yennefer does do magic, fire magic, to save Jaskier from the fire guy. That fire magic does in turn burn him, but she didn't lose her magic, and she saves, gosh, so much. Also, there's no Sandpiper plotline where he's like trying to like save the elves or people who need to get out. There's none of that. It's very strange. I also sadly thought that this whole like Burn Butcher Burn song was like a slighted ex. Like, it just sounded like this song's about my ex-boyfriend and he left me. And it's just like, Dandelion is definitely like that in the book. Just a little bit like, you know, sassy to Geralt, but he doesn't give me like ex-boyfriend vibes either. Yennefer doesn't kidnap Ciri after the end of their big old fight. There is no big old fight that happens there at Neneka's. After Geralt drops Ciri off at Neneka's, Geralt goes to find the firefucker, and that's it. And then Geralt doesn't see Ciri for a little bit until the next book. Geralt and Istrid, which is Yennefer's ex-boyfriend, don't have that meeting there. It's more, I almost would have rather the other scene where him and Istrid have like almost have a duel for Yennefer, and then Yennefer sends them a note saying like, I don't want to be with any of you and I'm leaving, and Geralt's like, all right, peace, I'm gonna go find Yennefer. I'd much more rather that than this whole like, Yenna. Like, it was so awkward and so weird, and I just didn't like it, especially considering that there is a scene where Yennefer tries to be with Istrid again, and that never happens. Like, after that scene with where Yennefer brings Geralt to that place where Istrid is, and they almost have a duel, she doesn't try to be with Istrid again. And it's just weird that, like, the last thing we saw of Yennefer and Istrid was like her trying to be with him at the archaeology site, and he was like, no, and then now he wants to be with her. It doesn't make sense. How come you're trying to make the character development fit into your plot? If you just let the character development be, there's plot, but they didn't do that, and it's very frustrating to me. Am I on my soapbox yet? Can you hear me? There's this whole thing about monoliths and the fact that Ciri is bringing on like this great shift or something, and that just is not a thing in the book. She is much more powerful now that she has been training with Yennefer, but it is definitely not so powerful that she's bringing on this great shift and more monsters are coming. That just doesn't happen. Honestly, after the short stories, monsters become fewer and far between. Maybe there's one or two that they end up going to fight, but it's much more focused on these character development parts. It's very important. And I know in the show they're trying to show all of these perspectives, so we get so much more about like the elves and Nilfgaard and all of these people, but like it just, we don't care. I don't care. I didn't care for those plot points. Not to mention that half of them were made up. Because there is no witch with the house with the stick legs or whatever that weird scene was. It was a horrific scene for nothing because it's not in the book. It creates this whole weird relationship between that Nilfgaard lady and the elf, and then all of a sudden Yennefer doesn't have power unless she sacrifices her daughter figure, but it would only feel tragic if Yennefer already felt like she was a mother figure to Ciri, but she doesn't, and so it's now just like sacrifice this random girl, and then Yennefer's like, oh, if I do, Geralt's gonna be mad at me. Not like I care for this girl and it's a horrible sacrifice. It just doesn't make sense. Like, if you want it to be a tragic moment, you have to have character development to be there. And if character development isn't there, then it's just plot, and you can't rely on the emotional impact that you're gonna have on the audience. So I pretty much like episodes 1 through 4 of this season, and after that, I just straight up didn't like it. Everything else was falling off. I didn't care for it. We will continue because it is something that my husband likes to watch, and I like to see what's different between the books and the shows. And I really like the books, and I'm continuing on for sure. I guess it'll just be something the show is just not necessarily for me. Maybe they'll turn it around in season 3, who knows? But for now, that's where I stand. And thank you for being here for my rant, really, because it really wasn't a TED Talk. I was just sitting here ranting at you. So thanks for being here. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!